Here we go.
Good evening, everyone. I am I'm today. I'm going to be the guest host. I'm no longer the host, but of the Secular Jihadists podcast. And my name is Faisal Baghdadi. I'm the secular caliph of Iraq and Syria. We are winning territory compared to ISIS, and that makes me really happy. And we have the typical hosts. We have Yasmin Mohammed, the author of Confessions of an Ex-Muslim. Hello, Yasmin.
Hi, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
I'm not answering that.
You're welcome. And with us, we have Ali Rizvi, the author of what's the Atheist Muslim. That's your book. And he's giving an upcoming talk in Toronto. In what time?
We are actually, by the time if this comes out next week, then it's actually Thursday the 21st. It's with Mohammed Sayed and Sarah Haider from XMNA, and with another.
And the location is Mosque of Toronto LLC, right?
Yes, it's in a Wahhabi mosque. That's what we're doing. So we're looking forward to that. It's exciting.
Armin Navabi, the founder of Atheist Republic and the author of Why There Is No Jesus, right?
No, Why There's No God.
Okay, cool. And with us, our guest is the one and only Dave Rubin. I'm very happy that I met Dave Rubin on a plane on September 11th. We were going to Tel Aviv together, and his cousin called us out and said that you should take another direction. And then me and Dave have been really good friends since then. Always talking about the story, and I've been on his show 4 times. This is actually the first time I'm interviewing Dave, or we are interviewing Dave. But I'm an Arab male, so I'm going to speak on behalf of the group. Welcome. Hello, Dave. How are you?
I'm good, guys. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. You know, I know all of you sort of to varying degrees. I've never talked one-on-one with Armin before, but Faisal, I know you the best, and Yaz and
Yaz is the best.
And of course, naturally, to different degrees. But I'm looking forward to this because there's so much richness in the conversation right now that we're all talking about all the time. And while there's so much goodness and fertile ground for good ideas, you guys know there's a lot of bad ideas out there. There's a lot of people with bad intentions. And I think it's important for as many of us that basically want to live in the same world. Doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, but basically want to live in the same world. We have to be doing more of this kind of stuff. And, Faisal, it's about time. I mean, you've been on my show like 67 times or something. So it's about time you return the favor.
72 times.
Right, 72.
Just like one for each virgin. So I think Yaz is going to start with the questions, but before we go ahead, I just want to say the same thing that we said to Majid that when he was on our podcast is that we're going to have disagreements. We want to bring that out. We want to talk openly. I think that you are like us in the sense that you enjoy the discussion, you enjoy the debate, and at the end of the day, you've been very supportive of especially people who are secular people from Muslim backgrounds. You've had me on your show. You've had Yaz, which was actually one of my favorite interviews that you ever did. You've had Faisal on 5 times. You've supported us a lot. You've had a lot of people who I really look up to, like Lawrence Krauss and like people like Jerry Coyne on your show too. So it's always been.
And one thing to mention, Dave has always helped us out in interviewing Bengali bloggers. When I mentioned to him that there are Bengali bloggers being attacked, Lubna from Iraq, when she was under attack, Dave has been more than help for many of the people who are under persecution, which is something that needs to be mentioned as well.
It's fantastic.
Just for the record, I don't want any extra credit for any of that because all I think that is having the very conversations that we're supposed to be having. If other people were doing this, the only reason I'm even doing the show that I'm doing is because I was waiting around going, why isn't anyone talking about any of this stuff? This is the important stuff. I mean, these are literally lives that are either being changed or coming to an end, which is why I was more than happy, of course, to talk to Faisal's friend in Bangladesh, why we talked to Lubna. I think I'm going to try to see Lubna next week, who just came to America, and we're going to finally get some actual FaceTime. So it's something that, for whatever reason, I think it's like you guys, it comes very natural to me to want to have conversations and hopefully make this mortal coil a little bit of a better place.
That's awesome. And then no matter how down and dirty we get right now, and of course we're going to disagree, we still at the end of the day, we're all going to get together in California at some point and have a beer, or in Toronto. So, or skim milk in the case of Faisal. I think you're underage, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No. Anyway, Yaz, go ahead.
So yeah, just segue from what Ali was saying, how appreciative we are that you have had almost all of us on your show, and you've had people like Ayan Hirsi Ali and Majid Nawaz, and a lot of people that, in general, you've had a lot of ex-Muslims. Obviously, you support us a lot, but you've had a lot of other people that are also considered like social lepers, basically, where they're not, mainstream media doesn't want to touch them. So it's really great that you are living by the values of free speech, and you really do believe that everybody should have the opportunity to speak, and you trust your audience enough to take the responsibility of using their own minds and making their own judgments. And we're just really grateful that you're willing to take that risk. And sometimes that risk can cause you problems, right? Like with this latest YouTube demonetization. Apparently all of those shows, what was it? A huge chunk of your shows that they demonetized were all because of adult content.
Yes,
I wasn't aware that that's what.
I hate to tell you, you people are very controversial, but you know what? It's not just, the truth is that it's not just you people. It's everybody. I mean, YouTube has, in effect, they've just wiped out our entire back catalog. We're fighting them on a lot of it. There's some question as to whether this is purely because of the algorithm, or, as James Damore, the ex-Google employee who I had on last week, whether the diversity stuff that's going on within the company is now actually seeping into the algorithm, meaning the algorithm, the AI is just sucking information. And then, the engineers do whatever they want with it. No one's really privy to exactly what's going on with the algorithm. But all of this diversity stuff seeping into the algorithm, so that if you talk about Islam, or if you talk to ex-Muslims, but more broadly, if you talk about free speech, if you talk about liberalism, I mean, a lot of the stuff that is my core stuff, that you will be demonetized. It's a little bit of going down the rabbit hole, because we don't know what the answers are, and they're not a very transparent company, unfortunately. But the irony is that, look, I want the platform to work. I mean, it took me, we've been doing this thing for years now, really 2 years it was 2 years ago this week, actually, I think 3 days ago, that we had that first show with Sam Harris on, and my life literally changed that day, because I wasn't even doing an interview show before that. I did a show that was a little more with comedians and sort of like Hot Topics on The View. But I sat down with Sam that day, and obviously you guys know more than most the whole story behind everything with Sam and Batman and all that. And when we finished that, I felt that I had done something important. I felt that someone who I saw getting maligned so unfairly, who was treated so poorly by supposedly our allies, right? These people of the left, I felt we had done a little cleanup that helped. And look, I think it helped in a lot of ways. I think, the people with bad intentions, they're always going to have bad intentions and do bad things. But anyway, I bring this to YouTube because I want this thing to work. And hopefully they'll start being a little more transparent. But, the libertarian side of me says, look, I can't tell a company what to do. And I don't want the government certainly to tell them what to do. And we'll see what happens. But you know what? My fans fund the show through Patreon. And as long as we can afford to do these types of things, I mean, just this past weekend, we flew Douglas Murray in. I know that's going to be not going to be monetized on YouTube, but I'm happy to do it as long as we can. And ironically, I don't even know what my audience's political beliefs are. That's really the truth. My patrons, I've only communicated with a very small, maybe 2% of them in any real substantial way. So I just have to do what I think is right, sort of like you guys have to do, and you let the chips fall where they may.
I find it interesting you were talking about the algorithms, because I don't know if you saw today that Facebook, when you want to advertise with them and then you choose the demographics of the people that you want the advertisement to go to, you can actually choose in the drop-down menu Jew haters.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I
so
did.
That got slipped past the algorithm there, didn't it?
I did see that today, and none of this surprises me. Look, it's none of it's a perfect system, and then not only do you have a non-perfect system, you also have human error, and you've got all sorts of other manipulations in there. It's one of the reasons why I just took the month off of the grid because I wanted to escape a little of this digital noise and the endless Twitter. Yaz, I know you did a similar thing not too long ago. Like just to get away from it and actually see people, face to face, look people directly in the eye, talk to people, and realize that, I was down in Mexico for a couple of days, and I met this Black and Latina lesbian couple, had a great time with them. We met a Christian conservative couple from Texas, had a great time with them. And it's like people are people, and it's the online world that's trying to rip us all apart, and it's all these trolls and bots that are making everybody crazy, and those are the people that we need to ignore most, not look to fight with all day.
I think the conversation aspect is probably even doubly important because, as you said, looking at it from a libertarian point of view, YouTube perfectly has a right to when we talked about one of the counterpoints I saw for this was, the bakers who wouldn't bake the cake for the gay couples, right? Do they have a right to do that? I think they do have the right to do that. I think it's horrible.
I agree.
It sucks, but if they don't want to, they don't have to. If it's a small business, right? I mean, if you're talking about a big corporation, that's a whole different issue. But with this. And then that's, I guess, where the fine line is. So that's why the conversation is important, because this isn't the kind of thing where we can, force companies to monetize something or, force people to behave in a certain way. And that's where, and it's not even always a matter of free speech, right? So what it eventually comes down to is that we use our platforms to talk about these issues and put pressure on people, put actual social pressure, social and political pressure on people to behave in a way that is true to our values rather than, having government or anybody else telling them what to do.
Absolutely.
So that's why the discussion is important, because if you don't have this discussion, then it comes down to, okay, who are we going to get to do, right? And it becomes a very slippery slope.
Yeah, and I'm glad. I didn't know that you agree with me on the cake, and a lot of my friends disagree with me, but I do agree with you.
I've always agreed on the cake. I've always said it. I've always said it was abhorrent, but like the whole, I remember I told you probably even on your show that it was, I'm a free speech absolutist. I think if a Nazi wants to speak somewhere and there are people who want them to speak, I don't think that you should violently shut them down. I don't.
Yeah. Well, there's also just some simple ways, not to get too lost in the weeds on that, but I think the most simple way you can explain this to someone is there are plenty artists online right now that you can commission for a painting, right? So my sister-in-law happens to be an artist, and we commissioned her to make a really awesome Millennium Falcon going into hyperspace painting that I think some of you guys have seen in my house.
Yeah, I watched her when she was painting it.
Oh, right. You were there. Right. So you were there when she was doing it. Okay. And that thing was not a labor of love because it was a very technical drawing, making it look like it was going into hyperspace and all that. But think about it this way. If you were an artist online and you took commissions, and let's say, just for any example, okay, so let's say you're Jewish. Would you like the government to force, if a neo-Nazi said, okay, I'm going to commission you and I'm going to demand that you paint this painting of Jews in gas chamber? No one in their right mind would want the government to come in and force that woman to do it. So yes, Ali, the operative word there, I think you said it sucks. It kind of sucks. Like it doesn't feel right. I'm gay, so I can appreciate that it would really suck. I also got married 2 years ago. It would really have sucked if the local baker wouldn't have baked me a cake. Now I happened to live in West Hollywood at the time where I'm pretty sure they wouldn't bake a cake for a straight wedding, but I think you see my point that like basically just, things kind of suck, but the government and society is not perfect, but just because something sucks, it shouldn't be an excuse for more government control. I would always use what you said, which is social influence. And now because of online and Twitter and everything else, we have the power. So you know what, if that baker really is a bigot, guess what? You could tweet about it all day. You can protest, you can do all those things. You can't do the burning down of the buildings and all the other stuff, but you can do what is legal.
And I want to be able to decide. I don't want to outsource. Freedom of speech isn't just freedom of speech. And I wrote this in my book too, and I think a lot of other people have said it before. It's your freedom to decide what you think is appropriate or not. It's your own individual freedom of hearing. It's also the freedom to hear. I don't want the government deciding what I should and should not hear. If there's something is bigotry, I want to hear it and I want to decide that it's bigotry, right? Yeah. And I want to hear who's making the better case. That's my issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one other quick point on this, I think one of the interviews that I did that really crystallized this concept for me, I had Randy Barnett on, who's a constitutional law professor from Georgetown. And what he was talking about was the foot vote, which means that basically his explanation of why states' rights are important. So if you live in Mississippi and they have laws that you don't like, or your local town won't bake the cake or any of those things, you have to use your foot vote, meaning get up, take your family, your values, your inherent worth to the community and take it somewhere else. Now, again, it sounds sucky, right? And not everyone has the economic pleasure of just picking up and going. But if you ultimately don't use your foot vote and we allow the federal government to come in and tell every company what to do and all those things, well, guess what? One day when you don't like what's happening, you can't leave the state anymore. If you don't like it, you got to leave the country. So I would always veer back on giving local power, and I would much rather be under the laws of the people that are controlling my little area here in LA more than getting all my laws from someone in DC. But I think that's a total sidebar to anything else that we're going to talk about.
Oh, that's a whole other podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
I'll let is it Yaz going next or Faisal?
I think me. Hello, Dave Rubin.
Hello, Faisal.
What's up? So my first question, actually, let's go with a positive one. From the moment you started your show, so let's say like from the interview you mentioned of Sam Harris to today, do you see any signs of hope that you're like being influential, being affecting people's lives, etc., etc.?
I see incredible hope, or I would not do this. I mean, I see incredible hope. Look, I've connected with people like you guys. Every time I walk down the street now or go to the supermarket, someone comes up to me and says, "Man, you're the only one talking about why people shouldn't be hating on each other," and blah, blah, blah. And my answer is always the same thing. Like, I wish other people were doing it. And actually, we are getting more people to do it. Evidence right now, because you guys are doing it right now and gaining your own audience. And that's a beautiful thing. But I think, look, even the phrase classical liberal, you hear that all the time now. All the time I hear that popping up on news now, and I see it in articles. Nobody was saying that 2 years ago. It sounded like some old fancy thing from the 1700s, but people are talking about that. They're understanding. Look, the hysteria, as we're recording this right now, Ben Shapiro's speaking up at Berkeley, so the whole place could be burning down right now. We don't know what's going on. But even the lead-in to this whole thing, where this guy, who Ben, whether you guys like him or not, and I've gotten to know him pretty well, and he's obviously been on my show a couple times, we obviously have disagreements on things. We have disagreements on very important things. I'm pro-choice, for example. He's pro-life. But we have to live in the
thing about the militant homosexual agenda. Like, remember that whole article he wrote? And there's a lot of things that I think we all disagree with him on. But
at the end of the day, we all understand, whether we want to or not, we understand we have to be able to live in the same secular, pluralistic society together.
Exactly.
So the people that want to just, every time, look, the other problem with all the protesters and all that stuff is that every time you do this, especially putting Milo aside, when you do it to a guy like Ben, and then he comes out and makes some really clear, cogent arguments, and then people hear it, and then they go, whoa, 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 this is the guy they were burning down for? Well, that strengthens him 1,000 times over. So Faisal, in answer to your question, I know it's moving. Look, we can look at it just the metrics. We can look at the numbers of the show, and especially the audio podcast is really blowing up. But more than anything else, every college that I go to.
Did you say blowing up? That's
that's cultural appropriation.
Sorry, guys. Sorry,
you're appropriating our culture.
Sorry. But I can see the numbers, and then every time I go to colleges, and Faisal and I have done a couple events together. You guys have seen me do some things. The rooms are always sold out. The amount of kids that want to stay after and talk and take selfies. I think I told Yaz about this, but I did an event at University of Arizona. I think Faisal, it was the day after the one we did. The last one that we did, and this kid came up to me after, and he looked so nervous and scared, and he was sweating, and it was making me a little nervous, actually, because you never know what someone's going to say to you after, and you're shaking somebody's hand. And he said to me, Dave, he's like, I want you to know I'm ex-Muslim, and I really appreciate the conversations that you've had on the show. And I said, thanks. And then he said, there's something else. He goes, also, I'm like you. And then he kind of paused for a second, and we had this really weird moment. Now, he was telling me, he didn't say it, but it was obvious that he was telling me he was gay, and he couldn't even say it. And then he basically started crying, and I kind of hugged him. We had like this really sort of powerful but also strange moment. And stuff like that, it's real. It's real. The conversations we're having are really affecting people in real life. And I think more than anything else, what I'm trying to do is make a little sense making come back. People want a little bit of sense. I don't have all the answers, and I do not pretend to have all the answers. But I want people to understand that you have to think for yourself to figure out what's going on. And that's particularly important in a time when everybody else is just screaming.
You also met my high school friend in a weird way when you were doing an event in Ohio, correct?
I did. In an elevator in Ohio, I was drunk. It was like 3 a.m. and a girl comes up to me and says, "Oh, I'm Faisal's friend. I knew him when he was a communist."
Well, we all make mistakes. Armin,
we'll have to talk about that later, Faisal.
Yeah,
I was not a formal communist, but yeah,
it's usually the step out of Islam for a lot of people. But I was sort of continuing on from your question.
In a weird way,
yeah. Continue on from your question, Faisal. I just wanted to say, like, I think that this bigger picture you were talking about, Dave, of our voices and these conversations and how they're resonating, and you're noticing differences. I was pleased to see this opinion article called "Liberals Sick of the Alt Left Are Taking the Red Pill" that you tweeted about today, where she says, one who articulates this best is Dave Rubin, a married gay man and former left liberal whose show, The Rubin Report, has explored the red pill phenomenon. So she talked about your video, "The Left is No Longer Liberal." And she quoted you where you said, "So if you're a true individual, meaning you don't subscribe to the ideas that the groupthink is attributed to you based on those immutable characteristics, you must be cast out." And boy, oh boy, do we get that.
By the way, we all get it. Everyone talking right now, we get this to varying degrees. If we were only to be judged on our sexuality or the color of our skin or the religion that we so happen to be born into, all of those things, it would remove every piece of us that I think is the piece of each one of us as an individual that we care about the most. Really interestingly, that little piece that you're reading from, it's on Fox News. So it's a Fox News opinion piece. Now, if you want to know how insane the whole media has become, the day that I had Yaz on and Faisal and I did the live stream as well, you guys know this. There was a reporter from Der Spiegel with me the entire day. This guy spent from 9 a.m. until about 9 p.m. because that night I did a free speech thing that you guys came to.
That's a German paper, right?
Yeah. So it's the biggest publication, I think, in Germany.
Yeah.
So I spend about 12 hours with this guy. I spend about 2-3 hours alone with him, just telling him my thoughts on everything. I'd spend hours with you guys on air talking about liberalism. By the way, Yaz, you gave one of the most beautiful 2-minute synopses of why liberalism is the answer to all of this. Anyway, we do this whole thing, and then Faisal knows this, and maybe you guys saw this. The guy wrote the worst sort of hatchet job about me being part of the alt-right and how much, and basically also is sort of prescribing that onto YouTube in a weird way. And then we did the free speech event that night, and he talks about how dangerous it was and all this stuff. There were kids laughing the entire time. I mean, the video is on YouTube. People can find it. UCLA with Colin Moriarty. You can watch it yourself. And the guy makes it seem like we were going to a hate rally.
It was crazy.
And I just mentioned
that.
Yeah, I mentioned it to just show you how upside down things are in the news right now. Like, I get good press off Fox for saying the same liberal things that I've always believed in, and I get sort of crapped on by left-wing media. So here we are. It's all right. What are you going to do?
And this is, this is a big problem, like for me personally, because I always get called anytime I'm talking about something. I'm very liberal leaning. I don't like the terms left and right because I don't even know what they mean anymore.
Yeah.
But there's many things I think that actually do align with the left. And every time I do, someone always asks me, he's like, "Well, what about Rubin? He's a Nazi sympathizer. Are you gonna say about him?" And I always tend to ignore it because this is the problem. When you're doing these events, and Dave, like, I disagree with you on a lot of things.
Sure.
And
Dave lost family to Nazis. I just want to say, yeah.
Yeah.
I know and this is what the problem is. And I have to defend you when you do these things. If you're going out and if you're doing these events on free speech, whatever you're saying, right? Whatever your opinions are, whether I disagree with them or not, and obviously, yes, we have disagreements. That I don't think that you should not be doing what you're doing. I think, and this is the whole problem with Ben Shapiro. I don't like a lot of the stuff he says. I actually disagree with probably most of it, but I'm always put in this position that when he's going in Berkeley, and now he's in the headlines all over the mainstream media because there's a danger that these rabid leftists are going to come, radical leftists are going to come shut him down, and I have to choose his side on this, not because I align with his ideas, but because free speech to me is much, much more important.
Of course, and what you're doing is showing mature, clear thinking. So I'd be happy to get into any of our political differences. Maybe we disagree on some economics or foreign policy. I don't even know what we agree or disagree on. But first off,
that's actually is completely irrelevant. When you have people who are trying to shout down other people and shut down their events, what we disagree on becomes what we have in common becomes much, much more important than what we disagree on.
Yeah, but when you hit on the key part of how idiotic the labels have become. So as Yaz mentioned, I had family members on both sides that died in the Holocaust. I grew up around Holocaust survivors. I knew my uncle, who married my dad's sister. His whole family was ravaged, basically. I mean, I know personal stories. So now the idea that people will say these types of things about me shows you how insane the whole game has become. Or even if you think about what's happening with Ben right now. Ben, who, again, we all have perfectly legit disagreements with. Ben, by the way, who I think judges, I know him pretty well now. I think he judges me more as a lapsed Jew than he does that I'm gay. I actually don't think he cares that I'm gay. I think he cares that I'm not a practicing Jew, right?
He was wearing a yarmulke on your show. That was kind of cute.
Right. So, but it goes to the point. It's like these people are screaming that he's a Nazi, and it's like he actually gets more hate from the alt-right than all four of us combined. So this is kind of the craziness that or all five of us combined. This is kind of the craziness that we're dealing with right now, and it's also why I've become increasingly like, you know what? These labels they just mean jack. Can I curse?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Say whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, the label's just.
No, this topic about free speech, the one thing you're not allowed to do.
Yeah.
I try to be respectful. I go Crowder's show sometimes, and he doesn't want me to curse. So yeah, I mean, they just mean jack shit. I will battle you on any idea that you've got, but the label thing, we all know what they're doing with this stuff, and it's become meaningless and hysterical, and it's actually strengthening the ideas they don't care about. Is Ben Shapiro going to be stronger or weaker after whatever happens tonight? It's already happened. You know what I mean? The media, the amount of people that know him that are going to hear of his ideas, it's already been expanded. So if you think that he's going to be stronger after this, which is absolutely true, then these idiots are just strengthening the ideas they don't want.
He doesn't have to say a word, and he's going to be stronger.
Hello.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Anyway,
so that's going to be my follow-up question, which is going to be the negative one. Well,
yeah.
and let me tell you why it's. How did I get it? I get it from many people who used to be big fans of your show, and I wanted to address their concerns.
Sure.
I mean, and their concerns is that, for example, like you don't challenge many people who have far-right ideals, like let's say Mark Cernovich, some of these folks who. Lawrence Southern, like people like them, who, to the way, like when you interview someone like Yasmin, who is as lovely as Yasmin, and then you interview someone like Lawrence Southern, you kind of deal with them the same way, to the way that the person who looks at the episode one after the other, they're like, oh, intellectual Yasmin, intellectual Mark Cernovich. Like you don't apply, like let's say if somebody says something,
you don't tell your audience what to think about the guest.
No, don't interrupt me, woman. But so what I was saying is that, like, when you have people with
cis woman,
crazy ideas, like Mark Cernovich, who publicized the concept of the gate, the thing with Hillary, like having Pizzagate, the one that Hillary had, like human trafficking in a pizzeria. And
also when in doubt, whip it out, about pulling out his penis. Well, anyway, that's a
that
out on us.
So like, what do you respond to your critics? I mean, Dave. I mean, I know you personally, and I love you a lot. But like, what do you respond to these critics who say that, like, you are quote unquote normalizing the far right.
Yeah. First off, guys, you don't have to apologize at any point here, unless you're going to tell me to go fuck myself. We're good to go. So you can say whatever you want to me and challenge me in any way.
Why don't you just admit you're a Nazi?
Yeah.
A Jewish gay.
Yeah. Jewish gay Nazis. It's the new thing. Listen, to your point, I mean, look, I get this question a lot. Very quickly on Cernovich specifically, when I had Cernovich on the show, it was at the very, very beginning of the Trump phenomenon. And I just wanted to get someone on who would defend him because it was, I could see it on Twitter. I could see like there's something going on here, but I couldn't find anyone legit. And he happened to be the one guy that maybe had 100,000 followers that like was talking about it in Trump specifically in a way that I didn't hear anyone else talking. So now you mentioned Pizzagate. This happened way after I had him on. All the stuff about sick Hillary, way after I had him on. Virtually anything that people, now I think the thing that Ali referenced about the rape thing and the penis thing and so, I guess that was in a blog post or something years before.
And it had been scrubbed from the internet. I think he tried to, and now it's there in the archives, but yeah.
So just to be clear, part of this stuff, and then I will get to the meatier question, but part of it is, people will say, well, he had that pro-rape tweet 3 years before you had him. And it's like, man, you think I can go through 10,000 tweets of a guy that I just came across? It's like, it's all sort of just, it's like sideline quarterbacking for everybody else. Now, to the specific parts, when
I don't speak football, I'm immigrant.
Yeah. So that's, I should give another reference there. It would be like someone who doesn't know anything about halal meat telling you how to cook.
Okay, I can understand that.
We all get that.
Yeah, got that? Did that make sense?
That brings the show to an end. Everything's clear.
It makes total sense, yeah.
Go ahead.
But in terms of my interviewing style, I mean, look, my friend and mentor is Larry King. And, Larry, when Larry was in the peak of Larry Kingness in the, let's say, in the mid 80s and early 90s, the critics of him would always say he's a softball interview. And I've talked about this with Larry. I've talked about this on air with him in our interviews, and I've also talked about it a lot privately. And his feeling was that you can always get more from people by being respectful to them, by being decent to them. And if they don't know what they're talking about, that they will hang themselves. And I consistently see this. Every time that I've had an interview with someone that I don't agree with all of the, first off, there's no guest I've ever had, including present company, that I agree with everything that they say. But my belief is that if you let someone talk, you can either see if they know what they're talking about or if they don't. So when people say, well, he has these alt-right people. Now, first off, just for the record, I've done hundreds of interviews. I think I've had Milo on twice. That is true. And by the way, I challenged Milo on a ton of stuff. Milo does not make this distinction between Islam as a set of ideas and Muslims as people. And we got into it about that. We did a half hour on huge differences of that we have about the gay community and plenty of other stuff. But if you want to go that alt-right thing, I mean, yeah, Cernovich, Milo twice. If you want to throw Lauren in there, I'm not quite sure if she fits. But beyond that, I don't think there's anyone else. Now, have I had conservatives like Prager and Elder and Shapiro and Glenn Beck? Sure. And have I had plenty of progressives like Cara Santa Maria and Jimmy Dore and Michael Ian Black and Hillary Rosen? Hillary Rosen, a Democratic strategist who I had on the week before the election.
Brett Weinstein.
And Brett Weinstein and Sarah Hayter and plenty of others.
Yeah, it's Stephen Fry.
So, but I don't even say any of that to defend myself other than I'm doing the best job that I think I can. And I think that nobody's perfect. And in 5 years from now, will I look back and go, oh man, there was that moment when Dinesh D'Souza said this about the Democrats and I really should have taken it in another direction. But my feeling is that people have been so dumbed down by what conversation is that you're so tricked now into thinking that if someone sits across someone and listens, that it means they're tacitly endorsing it or they believe what they're saying. And I just think it's a really immature way of thinking. I think it's not how many conversations in your life on a day-to-day basis do you have with someone who you disagree with and you don't automatically jump down their throat or assume the worst intentions or any of those things? I would argue all of us do that during the day. And my feeling is
podcast all the time.
Right, exactly.
Time a lot of the times too,
Yeah, and what you want to do, what I want to do, and it may not be what all of you guys want to do, but what I want to do is figure out why does someone think what they think and do they know what they're thinking? And yes, does that cause, look, back in the day, just to bring it to Larry King one more time, there would be a week where he'd have Louis Farrakhan on one day, David Duke the next day, the cast of Friends on next day, and then the creator of Sesame Street. No one in their right mind associated Larry King with all of these people. But for some reason now, because of the Twitter sphere and all the anonymous people and all that stuff, we all associate, oh, you sat down with who and did what? And you listened as that person said that thing? And I just think it's an immature way of viewing how conversation really is. And I'm not perfect, and I'm actually okay with people not liking the way I do things. If you don't, I always say to people, will be screaming at me, and once in a while on Twitter, I'll respond. I'll be like, is someone forcing you to watch? Because I'll try to get you help. If you're being locked in a basement and you've got your eyes like this with Clockwork Orange, like, let me call somebody. If you don't like it, then don't watch. That's okay. But the idea that I've normalized any of these people, I think, is kind of crazy. The way they get normalized is when they go show up to speak somewhere and you burn down a campus and then you make them that much stronger. That's not what I'm doing.
Are you sure your videos are not being played in Guantanamo Bay, in which they force people to watch it?
Guantanamo.
We tried to get it there because I'm working on other ways of monetizing because of YouTube. It's the government, so it's very slow. You know what I mean?
Armin, you had some questions.
All right. So I watched some of your videos, not with your guest, but yourself, right? Yeah. And I see that you do bash the left a lot. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't seen much videos on you criticizing the right that much, and I do see some people point out that your outrage seems to be selective toward the left, right? And you point out you have some very good points against about some regressive leftists, and you point out that there's a liberal bias in education. But what are your views on, Trump, for example, banning homosexuals from the military? Do you agree that there's a
trans people?
Yeah, trans people. Sorry. And do you agree that there's a transphobia problem in the right? There's a homophobia problem in the right. We do have a bigotry of lower expectations in the left, but we have direct bigotry common in the right. We have climate change denial in the right. We have people pushing creationism in education on the right. Do you address those problems?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So you're giving me two sort of questions there. So first off, absolutely. There's no doubt that I focus more on the left. My entire life, I was a lefty. In 1988, when I was in 8th grade and Michael Dukakis was running against George H.W. Bush, we did a mock election in my class, and I almost cried when Dukakis lost. I've always considered liberals the good guys, lefties the good guys. They cared about the little people. They cared about minorities, all of those things. They wanted to help the poor, all of that. Now, in the last couple of years, I would say in the last 5 years or so, there has been a massive shift on the left where, because they view us through this collectivist lens, they are always throwing out the individual. By the way, I'm talking to several individuals that in many respects have been thrown out. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who I know is a hero to all of us, who is she adored by? It's actually the right and the center. And who is she hated by? It's basically all of the mainstream left. Now, we
agree with these problems with the left.
So I'm gonna
with the right, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just saying why I focused on that, because I think for all of us, for all the people that I've seen thrown under the bus by the left, we were all trying to figure out, well, what are we then? How does this make sense? If our home isn't our home, what we thought was our home, when Sarah Hayter gave her speech and then suddenly found she was being attacked by leftists and embraced by righties and all this stuff. So that's just to answer the first part of why I've focused on that. Now, to answer your question about the right, first off, it's a little hard to figure out, at least in the American context, what the right is right now. Because is the right sort of traditional conservatives, so someone that I would say like a Ben Shapiro or a Larry Elder or Dennis Prager, these type of just traditional, basically limited government, more socially conservative, fiscally conservative, is that what the right is? Or is the right the Trumpism? And is it about this nationalism? And is it about whatever the cult of personality that Trump is? So I think you have to make that distinction when you talk about the right. The left, it's a little easier at this point to say the left, because Bernie is in bed with Linda Sarsour. I mean, this is I stand with Linda Bernie. These are the mainstream ideas of the left. If you were to talk about the mainstream ideas of the right, it's what are you really saying? Is it really what Trump is pushing? Because by the way, as we do this right now, Trump is basically working with the Democrats on DACA, for example. So as far as the right, yes, is there an element of the right that's anti-science that's completely insane? Yeah, but you know what? The right isn't the one that's deplatforming Richard Dawkins when he tries to show up somewhere. It's actually people on the left because he talks about religion. So I think also I view almost everything now through a lens of free speech and freedom of inquiry. And I think right now the right is generally doing a much better job on that.
It seems like when you're looking at the right, you're looking at their best, and when you're looking at the left, you're looking at their worst, right? Because when I look at the left, I also see, when I look at progressives, I see us, I see Majid Nawaz, I see Bill Maher, I see Richard Dawkins, I see Matt Dillahunty, I see Sam Harris, and when you look at I think this is what the left does to the right and the right does to the left. When they try to criticize the other side, they look at their worst arguments and their worst case scenarios, and they try to represent that as the entire left or the entire right. But I think if we want to steelman each side, we have to look at their best of each side. No?
Well, I do agree with that point, but I think partly, I mean, if we just go through those names that you just said, who hates Bill Maher right now? Every time he does a show, who hates him? It's leftists. It's not. So I don't know. So Bill Maher may consider himself a progressive still. By the way, I've never heard Sam Harris say that he's a progressive. I've heard Majid Nawaz many times say he's a classical liberal and say that the left is no longer liberal. Actually, when I finally did my direct message where I said the left is no longer liberal, we Googled the phrase because I didn't want to be stealing it or whatever. And it turned out Majid had said something almost verbatim a few months before. So I don't know that any of those specific people, I don't know for you guys. I think
he coins everything. He coined regressive left. The
guy's good. The guy's good.
Yeah. And he coined regressive left exactly for this reason, because he was differentiating between people like us who consider ourselves liberals, who are supposed to be on the left, but what he was coining with that phrase was the extreme fringe people, the people that are shutting down Richard Dawkins, the people that are shutting down Ayaan Hirsi Ali, the people that are problematic. And they're in our house. They're our group. They're our people. So, of course, we're going to be most upset and most betrayed, and we're going to call them out the most. And of course, people on the alt-right are a problem, but that's not a surprise to anybody. Everybody's aware of that. That's been identified.
Also, there's no evidence that these white supremacists or whatever these people are, that they have any institutional power or backing at universities or backing in higher levels of government or in the media or in Hollywood or any of those things. But you know which ideas do? It's the same ideas that are deplatforming you guys and Sam and Dawkins and the rest of it. So I think really what your question is whittling down to now.
I'm just going to interrupt you there. Yeah. I slightly disagree with that. I think that one of the problems with if I wouldn't call it robust backing, I think the fact that all of this stuff is sort of being overlooked, the way that Trump is initially, he hesitated when he denounced like David Duke during the campaign. He pretended his earpiece didn't work, even though he talked about him years ago about the Reform Party. I mean, he kind of hedges on this. He's very, very clear on everybody else. He's clear on like Crooked Hillary, Lion Ted, all that stuff. But when it comes to this, there is some equivocation. So that's
I don't know if Trump represents the right, though.
Well, that's
not fair.
Well, I mean, he is. He's the right now. He's the president.
So he's an individual. Right?
So we're talking about, as far as the optics go, there is a sense right now that the highest levels of the government right now are, if not directly backing sort of these extreme right white supremacist type people, they're apologists for them at least.
Okay, right. So the key word that you said there was optics. So look, I did not vote for Trump. I did videos on how to stop Trump. I had Sam Harris on right before the election, who is the most eloquent speaker I know, who's probably the most anti-Trump person on earth, right before the election. But there's a difference between optics and reality. If you think about the reality of Trump, now, again, I did not vote for him. I wish the guy wouldn't tweet. I don't like the way he talks. You guys know I care about discourse and I care about political philosophy. So this, in some ways, is the worst guy for the things that I care about. But that being said, there's a difference between optics and what's actually happening. And if you think about the person of Trump, you know, he's married to an immigrant and he has all, I think, Orthodox Jewish grandchildren. So the idea that he's a white supremacist.
I don't think he's a white supremacist.
No. But I'm not saying you think it. But when Jamil Hill from ESPN tweets it, and then so many people, you know, coalesce around this idea. Listen, I don't particularly like him, but I do think that there's just, you know what, the economy's doing pretty well right now. I don't sense that. I'm okay with some of the cutting of the regulations and things like that. Yeah, the trans military thing. I had Blair White on, who's trans this week, and we talked it out. And look, my view would be that if anyone passes the physical and mental requirements of being in the military, then absolutely they should be in the military. That would be my view. But the truth is that none of us are military experts. There could be some other element because there's so many elements already with suicides in the military, and then you add in a population who already has extremely high, if not the highest rates of suicide. I mean, there's just so many things that we kind of all pretend we're experts on that we're not quite. But do I have problems with the modern right? I'm pro-choice. I would not want the government telling my wife or my sister or my mother how to do what to do with her body. The right stands diametrically opposed to that. I'm gay married. The right did not do me any favors, even though they could have taken a small government principled stand on it. So a guy like, I'm actually more angry with a guy like Rand Paul, who should have stuck his ass, you know, he put his ass on the line and been like, you know what, I'm a libertarian. So even if I don't give a shit about gay people, I'm going to defend their right as a small government guy. You know, and
we agree with you there. I just want to bring in one more thing, and then I want to hand it to Armin because he had another question. But just for this this Trump thing, my problem, I think a lot of people are talking about is policies, and I feel like policies come and go. The bigger problem I think that everybody's concerned about is the rhetoric, and people usually say the rhetoric doesn't matter, the policies matter. But policies, including Supreme Court judges, they change after a few decades and so on, but rhetoric, like the stuff that Thomas Jefferson said, the stuff that Gandhi said, Martin Luther King Jr., I have a dream, all we have to fear is fear itself. These are the things that actually transform societies. And I think that the biggest concern with Trump right now is the problem with the rhetoric. Like, you said, yes, he's got a Jewish daughter and all that. And I guess this is a longer conversation, so I won't go on it too much. But, there was a Central Park 5 issue. There was a hedging with the David Duke thing. There was the lawsuit where he wouldn't rent to black people. There's a big history of it, which is why he's considered racist now. And then the whole Charlottesville incident. So I'm not saying that, whatever you think about it, and again, we'll probably disagree on it. I do think that we should acknowledge that there are legitimate reasons why people have concerns about him.
Yeah, I don't think I'm pretty sure I didn't say that there are no legitimate concerns about him. And again, I did not even support the guy. But this also shows you how insane the conversation has gotten, where it somehow seems if someone was only watching this portion of this and didn't know us, it would be as if you brought a Trump supporter on, which is kind of hilarious.
I know you're not a Trump supporter. By the way, I want to make that clear for everybody in case everybody thought that.
But I will say this. I will say this. And by the way, Sam Harris said it the day after the election that, you now have to view this as he's, the pilot of the plane. And I want this thing to succeed. And I can tell you that the basic pieces of what the government are supposed to be doing right now basically are working. The economy's working. I don't sense he's going to start nation building in the Middle East. I think we've actually gotten some of our deterrence power back because,
he's
it's
not
like
carrying out any of his policies. That's actually a good thing.
And you know what? But even that, then that should show you that our system is stronger than an individual. If he can't get this wall done, then that's a beautiful thing, in an odd way, because it shows the limits of power.
I agree with you on that.
And I think, and yes, in this regard, I'm definitely more libertarian in that whether it had been Hillary or Trump or anyone else, I would want all of them to have less power over our lives, because I believe that all of you have the most capacity to know what you want to do in your life, and I would always give the power back.
Yeah, I won't disagree with you there at all. Armin?
All right, so you've been advocating for free speech a lot, which is great. And you do mention the universities that deplatform people like Dawkins and stuff, but just like the cake example, isn't like universities, they have the right to who they allow in their platform, right? So removing somebody from a platform that you have is not really against free speech. It's bad policy it's just not against free speech. Isn't it a greater threat to free speech when the government comes, when the President Trump comes and says that he's going to open libel laws against the media?
But did he do that?
No, but that's why I'm calling it a threat, right?
Right. So
wouldn't that be like something? Well, the good thing is like the system works, so he can't. But isn't that something for us more to criticize as a threat for somebody in that position to be able to even talk about it? And also, when it comes to criticizing Trump, I know you don't support him, but you also say that we shouldn't constantly attack him because he's the pilot of the ship and we want him to work, and we shouldn't be trying to destroy the system. But isn't a system that works a system that you get to constantly criticize? And
I didn't say you can't constantly. I didn't say you can't constantly criticize him. I said he's the pilot right now, so I want this thing to work. You can criticize. Of course, the key tenet of free speech is you should criticize all day long.
So what do you mean? What do you say? What do you mean when you say people are kind of destroying the system, or like, what are the specific actions that you're referring to when people attack Trump? Well,
no. So I think I've said that there's a certain sect of people right now that want to burn down the system, and that I absolutely do believe. So all of the people that are out there literally causing violence, literally stopping speakers
like
from speaking and punching people.
Well,
but that's
like Antifa and
like Antifa. I mean, all the people that right now, as we're recording this, there's a reason that Berkeley had to put $600,000 into security to get Ben Shapiro there. I would have rather than put $600,000 into giving out dollar copies of the Constitution. I think would have been a better expenditure of money.
But also the alt-right is part of that, right?
Yeah, there are instances of the alt-right doing violence, of course. I mean, violence is...
Well, Steve Bannon also wanted to bring down the whole system and start it up again. I mean, there's philosophically, yeah, but I guess we're talking about the main violence, right?
I just want to make it clear that you're not saying that the people that are constantly shouting at the pilot and telling him that he's taking the plane down, they themselves are not taking the plane down.
No. Listen, they can. I feel like Faisal's itching to make a plane joke here, but these people, you know
me too well, David.
You're getting a little rusty. I mean, I keep saying plane over and over again, and you're sitting there quietly.
You're missing the cue, man.
Yeah. Of course, it is. Armin, to be very clear, it is your right and it is your duty as an American citizen or a citizen of any free Western country to fight the power using your words and ideas to the best of your ability. You cannot do things that are illegal, and you cannot infringe on other people's rights while you're doing that. But of course it is. But in terms of some of the stuff that you talked about at the beginning, I just don't know that those things are happening. I don't see really where they're coming for gay people. And even on some of the immigration stuff, you know, we're talking about all this stuff, but you know, Faisal, our friend Lubna somehow got here in the middle of all of this. So I'm not saying it's perfect for everybody, of course. By the way, Obama kicked out more illegal immigrants than anybody. And when you talk about the lies, again, I don't like the way Trump talks. He doesn't know what he's talking about half the time, and he lies constantly. But I think you could make an argument that
Obama... By half the time you're being generous, but yeah.
Yeah, but okay, right. So I'm being, okay, so, but I think you could make an argument that Obama's two lies, his lie about if you like your plan, you can keep it, which they knew was a lie, and his Syria red line, I would argue that those lies, although he lied in the way that we expect politicians.
Obama is not president anymore. So
no. But I'm just trying to explain that for a long time we just accepted a certain level of lying. So Obama said this to pass Obamacare. They've admitted they all knew it was a lie. But it was within the context of how we get lied to by officials, and we all liked Obama, and I voted for Obama twice, by the way.
What Obama did doesn't justify anything that Trump did.
I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it does. All I'm saying is there seems to be a strange outrage to lies now because this guy does it in an offensive way, and he uses language that we don't like, and his speech patterns,
and more,
and all of those things. Yeah, yes, pound for pound, absolutely. But right. I think you could argue that the Syria red line thing, although you can watch videos that I was doing at the time, I was completely against going into Syria. I think you can argue that lie, which it was, that lie did more to erode the confidence of our allies and strengthen our enemies than anything that Trump has done.
Anything that Trump has done, Trump has made in the United States foreign policy an embarrassment internationally. He's constantly a joke internationally. I mean, when it comes to Obama, we have to come up with a list of his lies. But when it comes to Trump, we have to come up with a list of the things that he said that were true.
But you got to give me some evidence. It can't just be optics and this is what
we are talking about. Optics.
If you look at the UN right now, Trump's gone into the UN because of Nikki Haley, and the UN is the most corrupt, backwards organization where Saudi Arabia sits on the Human Rights Council, and Libya was. And
Trump does deals with them. Trump's basically cozies up with Saudi Arabia, and he acts like he's anti-Muslim, but he's the main country he's supposed to be against. He basically does the biggest arms deal in history.
As did all of the presidents.
Right. I'm not defending those presidents. I'm just saying we can't be like saying UN is corrupt and then ignore the fact that.
No, but you're asking Dave to defend Trump, and I don't think he's in the position. He doesn't want to defend.
Well, I think it's an element. Just if I could say something, I think it's an element. The element of hypocrisy, like when Ted Cruz, when he supposedly click like on that little porn video, if anybody else did it, people would be like, okay, big deal. But when Ted Cruz did it, Ted Cruz has actually gone out and specifically said that people who stimulate their genitals, they shouldn't be allowed, or whatever that context was. He said it, so that's why it's looked at as hypocritical. So I think the problem with the whole Trump thing is that he actually came out and he said that he was different from all the other presidents. He's not going to make deals with Saudi Arabia. He's not going to appease radical Islam. We should name it and all this stuff. So when he does the same thing, I think people look at it as more of a hypocritical element. So it's more than just a lie, and I think that's kind of what Armin's trying to get at.
Yeah, and I think that in and of itself is fair. What I would say is, I'm sure most of you guys probably listened to Scott Adams' podcast with Sam, but I think Scott, although they really hit loggerheads at points, I think Scott does understand a little bit about what Trump does with persuasion, which, by the way, it's happening right this second. So last week, Trump announces the DACA thing. Everyone freaks out. And then what's happening this week? He's about to cut a deal with the Democrats, not even with the Republicans on it. So I think there's a little, yeah. So by the way, so that's what I'm saying. I think that you can't just look at things through the way the optics are, or say, well, our European allies think we're all idiots now, or give me something that's real. Give me the real policies.
The way Scott Adams talked about Trump is the same way that Islamic apologetics talk about the Quran. Basically, they take the most horrific things that we could say and try to come up with the ridiculous justification. You mentioned that one thing that came out of Trump being elected was the fact that now everybody is talking about politics and they're more involved and stuff. Yeah. But that doesn't make sense to me. Like it's kind of like saying like, I got cancer, but at least now I'm talking about my health. I'm paying attention to health more. Like, do you enjoy the fact that this is a huge, on from Trump? Is that okay?
I'm so sick and tired of talking about Trump.
These are my questions. These are my questions. Yes.
Yeah, but that's like 5 questions.
Okay, so no, finish what you were saying. The last question, Armin.
Well, okay. Listen. I can. It's all good. It's all good, guys. Really. But yeah, I mean, I think just generally people are sick of talking about Trump. But yeah, we can finish this. Listen. Your question there is implying that I think Trump is cancer, and I don't. I think he is a corrupt, flawed, now politician, just like the rest of them are. I think there's weird things about him that are different for sure. But I think there is a level of engagement happening in America right now that actually is incredible. I think that there are more people. There's a reason people are now coming to you guys for some sense making and to hear the voices of ex-Muslims and realize that you guys are here. There are people going, wait a minute, like that used to be like me 2 years ago, going, wait a minute, I'm liberal, but the progressives have gone out of control. Or there are people that are going, a guy like Ben Shapiro is going, I've always been on the right, but Trump seems too far for me, or whatever that is. So I think there's incredible opportunity right now to realign things, which is why I like the phrase that Ali talks about all the time, which is the new center. And I think that thing can be a very wide thing, because I think in a time of upheaval that we have right now, it's a time of intellectual upheaval, what you get is fertile ground. Doesn't mean what's going to happen now is good. It doesn't mean it's going to happen bad, but it gives us opportunity to fight for the things that we believe in.
Just like my home country is called the Fertile Crescent.
Yeah, and guess what, my friend? You just texted me the other day and were telling me about some of the good things that are happening in Iraq right now in terms of ideas. And the reason is that upheaval, all sorts of people can die in the midst of that, and you can have horrific ideas that can last for hundreds of years, but also some nuggets of goodness can come out of it. And I just, for what I guess, you know, I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I think there's some good opportunity here. I really do.
You're part of DACA? Okay, that was a terrible joke.
So I said that very soon after.
Can I
take that back.
When I was listening, Rubin, I mean, it's, people talk about like the intellectuals and all of these of how much they have influenced atheism or not necessarily atheism, but secularism and anti-Islamist tendencies within the Middle East. Yeah. But ISIS have actually created the most secularists in Iraq. Like, as a result of many people, because of ISIS, are now seeing like the concept of theocracy, and it like the secularism in Iraq is like now really making its way to the mainstream as a result of ISIS. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not trying to defend ISIS in any shape or form, obviously, but
ISIS sympathizer. Everybody, Faisal Said al-Muhtar is an ISIS sympathizer. I just want to say.
But I was saying that there is some positive things that can come out of the bad, and we should not think of when something bad happens, only bad things happen. There's a much more complicated world that can happen out of just negative things happening.
Sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you need something like this to really light a fire up on your ass and wake you up from complacency.
And guys, by the way, let's not forget, if Hillary Clinton had won, who really couldn't even say the phrase radical Islamic extremism or any of that stuff, not that I get so caught up in those words, but a lot of the screws that have been working against us, the strengthening of the Hollywood machine and the political machine and the establishment that has been purging and ignoring people like you, actively ignoring people like you, so they work with Linda Sarsour instead of Ayaan Hirsi Ali. That machine would have been strengthened. So I'm not saying that what we have right now is Trump and everything's great for all of us and this should be celebrated. But what I am saying is that the screws that were kept turning against the ideas that you guys care about and you as people, those screws would have been. Do you think Linda Sarsour would be closer to the White House if Hillary was in charge? Yes, obviously.
She'd be in there.
She'd probably be in there, and Ayaan would be that much further away.
Look how they treated Ayaan when she went to the Senate committee.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh no, that I think we agree with you on. Again, like as Armin said, the regressive left thing is something that we all complete. I mean, I have a whole chapter about it in my book too. So. Yeah. That's something that we're all aligned on for sure.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask a question. How much time do you have left, Rubin?
Well, my computer's got 13%. So
I have a question.
Yeah, go. Let's go. We'll keep
going. Did you have one, Faisal? Am I interrupting you?
No. Go ahead.
Okay. So I actually wanted to ask you a personal question, Dave.
Yeah.
So I heard you talking a little bit about atheism, agnosticism, and stuff like that. So now I just wanted to give you, like, from my perspective, I'll give you my own personal story before I ask you your personal story.
Yeah.
I call myself an atheist, but technically I'm an agnostic atheist. That means that I'm not saying hard and fast there is no anything, but what I am saying is I don't know if there's anything or not. And I know for sure that this book here wasn't written by any deities, like he didn't send an angel to talk to some guy in a cave. I know all of that is bullshit, but I don't know what the truth could possibly be. Yeah. So could you share with us like where you stand in that whole continuum of agnostic or atheist or are you still are you an Orthodox Jew? Tell us the truth.
No, much to Ben Shapiro's chagrin, I am not an Orthodox Jew. I think your explanation actually is as eloquently stated as I could put anything that I have. I am not a believer in some magical thing out there that judges me for who I sleep with or can read my thoughts or even cares about my life in any way. I have sat down with way too many smart people, from Dawkins to Krauss to Harris to many others, and I've read too many books, and I've just fired too many neurons in my brain to ever think that. That being said, I think maybe you're asking me this because the day I came back on the grid, I was doing a live stream and someone asked me something about atheism, and I wasn't expecting to answer it, but I in a very off the cuff moment, I had a 45-second little thing where I said something like, I'm not sure how at this time in my life I'm comfortable with the word atheist anymore. And really what I was just doing there was just saying that, again, these labels I don't think are really doing anything for anyone. So everything that you just said there, I absolutely believe in. Those are the ways I believe in things. That being said, are there moments, you know, when I spent some time in Mexico and I was really trying to like purge the nonsense and the Twitter and the noise from my brain, were there moments where I felt something a little transcendent, or I felt that I wanted to be connected to something else, or that something else might be out there, whatever that thing is? Do I think it's this, you know, thing that's staring at me? Of course, as I just said, no. So really, that's all I was saying in the context of that. But more than anything else, the fact that the word that I really like is secular, which is why I like that you guys call this the secular jihadist.
That was Armin's idea.
Yeah. So Armin, we may not see eye to eye on everything and it's all good, but the fact that you picked that word is the more important piece of this, because secularism is what the answer to this is. The piece, that 2-minute piece that I referenced earlier, Yasmin, where you talked about liberalism on my show, that's the answer here. And liberalism and secularism are what will unite all of us and allow us to live in a society where, guess what? There are going to be Christians who are believers, and there's going to be gay people and everything in between and all of those things. And that's what so the ideas of secularism, that we should take religion out of government and we should be governed by the principles, in our case here in America, by the Constitution, which is a pretty goddamn good piece of literature written by people who really had a great understanding of what freedom is because they lived under a king who was thousands of miles away. I think that is the answer. So I saw a ton of people actually were pissed at me for this 45-second little unprepared thing that I said. And it's like, you know what? All right, congratulations. Then you guys, the atheist skeptic community, can be as judgmental and dickish as all the people you mock all the time. But I would say, even if all of us here had slight little differences on what we think belief or lack of belief is, it's actually beyond irrelevant in the scheme of things.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And Majid says the same sort of thing. He says the line isn't between religious and not religious. The line is liberal or illiberal. And Faisal says something similar too. He says, well, communists don't believe in God either.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
I mean,
the line is between true and not true.
I think it's completely irrelevant. I mean, I would rather live in a liberal society. I mean, I would like the world to be more rational and to be more accepting of evidence and everything, but I would take a believer who believes in liberal values than an atheist who was an authoritarian. And that is not to say that atheism leads to authoritarianism, but I mean one of the points that we're having in the former podcast about because I just came back from Denmark like about a month ago, and the majority of people in Scandinavia are atheists, but also what happens is that many of them are more relativist atheists. Okay, so with that more relativism, and then there is an upcoming culture who is very strong in its values, right? The Islamist, whatever you want to call them, that are very strong in their values, have a very strong identity. I would rather take someone who actually believes in liberal values and first, and put that as the standard and universal human rights, versus having this, well, it's their culture, where what's ours is ours, and what is theirs is theirs.
Absolutely. So by the way, Faisal, that's why you and I have discussed this privately a little bit when we've talked about, what can be in the new center or whatever. And I'll say to you something like, well, a guy like Dennis Prager, who I have massive political disagreements and certainly theologically.
I had the 3 tequilas that night. Can you remind me of that?
Well, you had more than the man can drink beer, I'll tell you that much. But my point was that I don't know that, look, we could spend a whole other episode, and maybe we'll do it sometime, or I'll have you guys all on at the same time and we can talk about the new center. But my point was that you actually do want to live in the same society that Dennis Prager wants to live in. You may disagree on abortion and on taxes and all those things, but the tenets of the society, the tolerance, and the pieces of the classical liberal ideas that you both hold, which I think are many, you want to live in the same society. So it's the people that are trying to rip that down that I'm concerned with, and I'm not concerned with the people who I just have these political differences with, which it's like, that's the whole point. Thank God we live in a country where we're allowed to have political differences with people.
I would rather personally live in a society in which religious values are not imposed on society. and have people to have the right to believe whatever they want and not have any sense. I mean, I came, so in a weird way, so I came from Saddam Hussein, who was to some extent a secular dictator, even though he was not, and also the Islamists, right, that came afterwards. And both are authoritarians, and I don't want to live under any authoritarianism whatsoever. I mean, I oppose authoritarianism itself as a concept, and there are many religious people who adhere to that anti-authoritarianism concept that I think could be our allies.
And by the way, that's why I believe in limited government and small government, which I think is very much a principle of classical liberalism, but I, without question, have a strong libertarian side that might then technically be to the right of what some of you guys may believe, and that's totally all good.
Just to be clear, though, saying atheists advocating for atheism, that doesn't mean that you don't think other people should be able to have their religion. Secularism means everybody gets to advocate for their views. That includes Christians advocating for their views, Muslims advocating for their views, and atheists advocating for their views.
Absolutely.
So,
Nobody's
Of course, that's why I said I like the word secular, because
I know, but I just want to point out to anybody that just because I advocate for atheism, that doesn't mean that I'm saying that other religions should be banned or anything like that.
No,
That's just it.
secularism means freedom of religion and freedom from religion.
And in fact, it's the only way to protect the freedom of religion, because if there is a theocracy or any favoritism going to one religion over the other, it means that other people don't have the same rights to advocate for their views the same as the people in power do.
Absolutely.
And on that note, first of all, I would like to you, David, to thank you so much for accepting, even though our podcast is really small by comparison to your show.
Not much longer, guys.
The fact that you have accepted to come to us, I can speak on behalf of all of our people here. Would like to thank you so much for being here. I will leave the final word to Yasmin. She didn't talk that much in the episode, so maybe she get the chance to do the final word.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to continue from what you were saying there, Faisal. You have given us all an opportunity to speak when, we weren't getting the opportunity anywhere else, and we're incredibly grateful for that. And we're really glad to be able to have you on as a guest. We're very honored, and we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Well, listen, I know you guys all to varying degrees. Faisal's certainly the best. He's become one of my good friends, and I think what you're all doing and what you're trying to do is not easy, and it's passionate. And whether Armin and I have disagreements that, this is literally the first time we've spoken. If we have disagreements on big issues, that is great. And I hope you guys disagree on some things, and I know you do. And that's the point. And specifically,
oh yes, we do.
And
we do quite a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the point, though, and that's why it's so ironic what's happening, where you guys are ignored by the very people who are supposed to be caring about you the most. There's a reason that there's a lot of Jews in this space, because most of the people that are Jews, that they're nominal Jews who have a cultural identity to this, but have given up on most of the things that are not provable, have given up on the superstition and all of those things. And ironically, I think in most respects, that's exactly what you guys are doing. That's why Ali's book, The Atheist Muslim, it sounds so crazy, except I could give you a gajillion atheist Jews that no one says they're not Jewish. You know what I mean? And I believe, right. And it's not for me to tell Ali whether he's Muslim or not. If he believes that he's Muslim and is not a believer in superstition, then I think that's wonderful. So I think the opportunity that, for whatever reason, Jews were always thinking about, there was always an emphasis on education and science and things like that. Because of that, so many Jews were able to give up superstition and live in a secular world. That's exactly what you guys are trying to do. And I will always be your ally in that fight, because it's the same fight that I'm having, because we want to live in the same world, really.
You brought up something that I have to respond to now.
Can
We're supposed to be ending this.
But can I also go after you? Yes.
Sure. Okay. I can't say no, because I'm the one who's breaking the rules. First of all, I wanted to say too that I think that there are a lot of Jews that are supporting us as well, because they get us for lots of different reasons. I just tweeted about this today. Actually, one of the reasons is they don't have white guilt, and they understand what it means to be hated by Islam. So we have that in common. And I think that another important distinction is that Jewish people used to be like protected by the left, right? So they were like, oh, the Jews are an oppressed minority, so the left have to support them, and they're totally against anti-Semitism and all that stuff. But now that Jews have sort of, they have Israel, they found their voice, they've found their strength, they're stronger now, they're louder now. And now the left have sort of been like, you know what? Actually, we don't like you Jews anymore.
Yeah, we're done with you. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't. You know what? Now you're just white. Now you're just privileged white assholes, and we're going to throw you in with that, with these group of people that oppress. You are no longer the oppressed. Now you're oppressors. And they did the same. They're doing the same thing to ex-Muslims. So when we're Muslims, we're like, oh, you're this little group of of oppressed people, and let's take care of you. But as ex-Muslims, we stand up loud and proud, and we say, no, we've denounced this faith, and this is who we are, and we're our own individuals. And so they say, we don't like you guys anymore. We like the broken people that we can, pat on the head and take care of, and then pat ourselves on the back and say, yay, look at us supporting these little broken people. But they don't want us when we're standing on our own 2 feet.
You're totally right, and this is why Faisal was the first one that I ever heard say Prussian Olympics, although Majid probably coined that too. But
he coins everything. That guy. I think he secretly wrote the Quran. He just nobody. Yeah,
he probably did. But they want to use all of this oppression and use victimhood as virtue to keep everyone hating each other. And I would much rather stand on my own 2 feet and as an individual and say, here I am, here's what I think, than to be faux-liked so that they can control all of us. That is much more dangerous to me. Just FYI, guys, my computer is 3%.
Okay. All right,
so
I'm going to just quickly thank you for giving a platform to, there are not that many people that pay attention to ex-Muslims, and they don't get a loud enough voice. And you have given a voice to Ali, Faisal, and Yasemin. I watched her interview. That was fantastic. And I just want to say that this is a group of people that are attacked by all sides, and they don't get that much support. And I just want to really thank you for using your platform to bringing attention to them. Everybody should be grateful for you doing that.
Well, I thank you guys for your kind words, and we will continue this in the future, and we'll all break bread and
have hummus.
There will be a lot of hummus. There will be a lot.
That's great. Yeah.
Thanks again, Dave. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again. I hope to see you again in maybe future interview, or maybe you interviewing us, or we interview you.
Don't close the Zencastr tab.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much.